I've managed to get it to work at last. Here we go. This is only a quick lecture because it's a fairly straightforward subject. The readings that are provided are pretty good, and you can find a lot of information on these just by doing a Google search, to be honest. Queens and Government's got a very good site about it. But let's have a very quick look at these post-occupancy evaluations or reviews that we do. Why do we do them? What are they? I like the way I've laid this out because it covers my little fat face. So why do we do these? Well, according to the Queens and Government, because I found that to be the best place to go, these post-occupancy reviews is basically a process where we talk to the people in the building to measure how successful our project or our design has actually been for them, for the operation of whatever they do, whether they're a call centre, individual offices, a training centre, whatever they are. Maybe they could be a warehouse, a factory, any of those. We're trying to find out how successful our design actually was. Because normally, bear in mind, the people who do all the design, the professionals designing these things, have never actually worked in this environment. So they're just going by their education and the legal standards, etc. So, and their experience, of course. So we need to talk. So it's to determine whether we've actually met the needs of the occupants, and are they actually satisfied with it? Are they comfortable? But you ask the question: what could the layperson possibly tell us highly educated and skilled professionals about our designs? I mean, what could they possibly let us know? We know it all, don't we? Well, they can tell you what they want and what they need from their building or area. They can explain how they do their work, because we may not understand that. They can tell us what equipment they're going to need to use. Could be specialised equipment. They may need certain amounts of privacy and not an open plan office completely. You often find breakout rooms now have been provided, not just for meetings, but for people to go and do a little bit of private work away from all the noise and everything. They may have excessive storage. They may need secure storage. And it goes on and on and on. So we've got to ask ourselves, what's the problem that's going on here? What's reducing the happiness and productivity? Are we actually having that impact? Are people being sick? Are they not going to work? Are we affecting psychological health by our designs? There's a lot to be said about open plan offices if you want to go and research those. They are economic, and certain uses support them, but generally you'll find that professionals, architects, engineers, blah blah blah, they like their own personal space. They don't like these big open plan offices too much. I mean, that's why you'll find that a lot of architectural offices nowadays, the architects will be open plan, but there'll be a lot of breakout rooms for them to go and work quietly and to sort of brainstorm with other fellow professionals, which is very difficult to do in an open plan office. Queens and Government's a very good source of information. There is the link here, really more as a reference than for you to find. You can Google this quite happily. Typically, these post-occupancy reviews are done between 3 to 6 months after they've taken occupation of the space, the office, the building. So they've had time to bed themselves in, and any issues now become obvious. Issues that occur really quickly are normally related to the way they're using it, or the way they've laid it out, or something like that, which they solve themselves very quickly. But 3 to 6 months, and the more fundamental issues start to come to the top. The reviews, to actually make them useful, we need to be able to rate the answers. So you need to develop a rating system to actually measure satisfaction. You could just simply do it on a 1 to 5 rating if you want to. They can be very complex, or they can be very general. They normally rely on a survey, and you just go pick, how satisfied are you? 1, extremely. 5, no, I want to commit suicide. Then the review is inclusive. It's a process for the occupants. They're used to doing it, and it's an important part of the communication of the project. It's like the circle of life. You design the project, you build the project, you occupy the project, and then you learn what you did and didn't get right, and that feeds into the next project. So each project should be getting better. And the process, it identifies issues that need rectification quickly, or they need a bit of adjustment, or there's some refinement, and that all feeds into the design for the next project. So we're learning as we carry on. So this is a continual professional development opportunity for any building professional. It can be quite stressful for the occupants if we get it really wrong. Go back out of that. So that's why we want to do them. It generally affects the health of people. So if we look at the health, we've all heard of sick building syndrome. It's well known, well publicised, well researched. It isn't due to one factor, it's due to many factors. Obvious ones that I can pick out for you is air quality, ventilation rates, temperature comfort, thermal comfort, lighting provided. Is it general lighting across an office that occupants have got absolutely no control over any of this? Or do they have some lighting on their desk, some task lighting that they can actually control? Interesting, we should consider some research on the health effect of LED lighting. I'm not going to go into detail about that, but you could just do a little bit of research on LED lighting. It's increasingly becoming suspected, still suspected, not proven, that it may be having an adverse effect on people's sleep patterns and concentration due to the colour, and apparently there's a flicker to them, but I didn't know that. The internal layout, which is obviously done after construction, but may be part of the design. I mean, you might have done a commercial speculative office building, so you're not responsible for the layout. That's the client themselves. But even then, they'll take a professional to design that layout. They can actually cause a lot of dissatisfaction. You might find out that it's almost like your desk and where you work is like sitting in the middle of a maze, and it's a pain to be able to weave all your way out to get to the kitchen or get to the toilet or get to the breakout meeting room. You might have a layout that with the partitions between the offices, etc. And we always seem to put the managers in offices against the external wall so they get to see daylight and greenery. Everyone else doesn't. And that is a big psychological issue, not being able to see out of the building. Lack of personal space in open plan offices. Yeah, well, you can get disturbed by your neighbours, phones going off all the time. The person next to you might be constantly chewing popcorn, or you just don't know. And it can become a problem if those spaces are not separated by a higher screen between them, maybe. You'll see in office spaces, if you have a look, a lot of people are wearing headphones nowadays because it cuts them off from what's going on around them, which comes down to the noise point. Noise can be very distracting. And that, not only due to the open plan nature, due to the nature of the work that's being done close to you and around you, can also be made worse by the carpets, the surface finishes that are used. If they're not slightly absorbent, you get a lot of echo and it can amplify the noise. A noise from a long way away can appear to be right on top of you sometimes. On the other side, if you deaden the noise with too many soft surfaces, you can create an uncomfortable atmosphere. You can't win, really. Then there's the peripheral movement outside of your eye. People are always walking past you or jumping up and down like little meerkats in the desert, popping up above their workstations. There could be distractions if someone is having a personal conversation about yesterday's AFL match or something with the person next to you, and they're quite excited about it. It can be very distracting to you. Or someone having a loud personal conversation on their mobile phone. The sort of person who doesn't need a mobile phone because they're that loud. We pop back again to the air quality. That can be due to poor maintenance or poor design and maintenance of the ventilation systems, of the air conditioning systems. When I was doing some large portfolios responsible for them, we had a lot of problem with people saying that they were getting chest infections and eyes and noses and all this stuff in certain rooms in a building. And when we investigated them, we eventually found out that the air conditioning ductwork, which is normally hidden, you can't see it, but obviously you have to duct the air in and duct the air out, hadn't been cleaned since the building was commissioned 15 to 20 years ago. And there was no access into these ducts. We had to cut panels into them to shove little CCTV cameras in, and it was disgusting. There was, you name it, I tell you, it was in there, and that was suspended in the air, and they all had to be taken out, renewed with access panels, and put. We actually put ultraviolet lights in some of them that kills off a lot of the bacteria, and they were cleaned every 12 months. But that was overlooked. It is a big problem on older buildings. And, of course, nobody wants to do much about it because it costs extra money. I did find this International Well Building Institute, and they're actually quite interesting. Obviously, they're a commercial organisation, but they do. They identified these major issues. So acoustics, we talked about acoustics. Thermal comfort, but they expand that to be the humidity. The airflow. Now, if you've got too high an airflow, you'll feel it, and it can be very grating on you if you're under a vent in the ceiling and it's ruffling your hair all the time, and you can hear the low noise from it. You need to clean them and inspect them at least twice a year, and that's what I was mentioning earlier, where we had to rip it out and put new ones in. The furnishings provided can have a great effect on people's satisfaction. Not only can they affect the comfort, they can affect their thermal comfort, they can affect noise. There's loads of things you can do. Remember, these people are sitting down for probably 8 hours a day, although there is an increasing movement to the standing up desk now. Workspace light levels and quality. All right, so you're in an open plan office, or you might be in your own little manager's office, but you've got no control over your lights. They're all automatic nowadays. You may not want them on. You might want a spotlight, a task light, as we would say, on your desk. That's an easy way of making people feel as if they've got control of their environment. That can be a big psychological turn-off. They're just treated like a battery hen. Then there's like odours and stuffiness, not enough air movement and air change. And you can get other quality concerns. You can see dust in the air. I mean, you can go on. Increasingly, these offices are putting real live plants in because they really have a beneficial effect on people. The cleanliness and the maintenance that's being undertaken, if people feel as if it's not being cleaned and things are going wrong and not being repaired, you're going to get their backs up, and that's going to affect their work. And then finally, as I mentioned, the layout of the office, etc., needs to be carefully considered, not just from the legal point of view for the fire escapes, because you have to have a limited maximum length of travel to get to a fire exits and that, but more from the practical everyday use. So there's the reference for them. A little bit about them at the bottom there, but they're quite good. They're well worth a look at. Right, so we're going here. What do we do next? Well, I seem to be going in the wrong order again, which is normal for Kevin. So we're just, as long as you're not getting too sick at this thing here. The psychology of it. Well, I found a published peer-reviewed paper. I've given a little link to it there. Psychology is really beyond the level of this unit, but it is really, when people get annoyed about all these irritations, about the noise and not having control of the environment, etc., it is all basically mostly psychologically based and not physically based. Although you can get physically ill, you can get eye strain, you can get chest infections, etc. But this one here, the definition of internal environmental quality, or internal, is the quality of a building's environment in relation to the health and well-being of those who occupy the space within it. Wacko, stick with that one. It's all about the users. Now, how do we do it? Oh, look, it's gone to the right one this time. How do we actually go and do a post-occupancy review? this comes from Queensland Government again, really. It's a communication with the stakeholders. It's the individuals or the groups who might be affected by the post-occupancy bit. You're talking about the building owner, the building manager. You may want to talk about the maintenance people, but mostly you're talking about the workers, the individuals who have to perform their tasks in this building or office floor or whatever. They're the ones we communicate with, make them feel listened to and wanted. It's, again, psychologically very beneficial. We've got to determine how we're going to collect the data from everybody. How are we going to do that? We'll talk about methods in a minute, but are you going to do it by paper? Are you going to send out a web survey? There's loads of ways of doing it, and they're not all suitable for every occasion. You might send different questionnaires to the general working people, but a different one to maybe the managers and the building managers, etc. Then you actually got to conduct the survey, which is normally done over a period of maybe 4 weeks. Then you've got to analyse the results. It doesn't just mean looking at the results. You'll actually do some statistical analysis on the results, and you may get an occupational therapist to look at them, etc. Then you develop an action plan on how you're going to improve the issues that are not satisfactory. And then you will write a report that goes off to the building owner and the senior executive stakeholders, so they can see why they're going to spend money on a building or a floor they've just spent a lot of money on. And then they're going to work out how they're going to program that over a period of time. How do you do this? Very simple, straightforward. Interviews. You can interview people. This is where data comes from for any sort of asset management. So you interview important people, people with knowledge. You send out a general questionnaire to the people just working in the building. They may not have any knowledge of what's going on in the background, but they know what's getting in the way of them doing their job. You can observe. Observation. Got to be careful with privacy on this, but observation's interesting. You can soon work out, if you video an open plan office, what the main routes of travel are, and you can tell where there's obstructions and where you can improve it to make it easier for people. You can review records they've got. Are there areas in a building where there's more sickness, more absenteeism? Why is that far corner getting more of it than everywhere else? You might find there's an air conditioning issue or something, or there could be next to a window that hasn't got enough solar gain reduction, for want of a better word. It might be getting too hot. Look at the maintenance records. There might be certain things that are sort of attracting a lot of maintenance, and that might be because people are treating it heavy-handedly because they're fed up with it, or fed up by the time it took them to get to using it. Quite often occurs in toilets and kitchens, actually. And then you can benchmark against similar buildings or similar office floors. So if you're a portfolio manager and you've got more than one building and more than one office, benchmark between them all to see if any of them are working better than others. Or you can commercially benchmark against other commercial buildings. Very useful thing to do. So that's the methods for doing it. Now I need to go back, excuse me, to what next. I don't know why I got these in the wrong order, because I'm such an IT guru. Oh, we go back. We've seen all these, but we're heading back to what next. Here we go. So you've now got your results. You've worked it all out. We now have our positive, because people say nice things, but it's the negative feedback as well. And we treat them evenly, just like when you give feedback on the Moodle, on the unit at the end of the term. We like to get even-handed feedback. So you say nice things about the good stuff, and then if there's anything that didn't work well, you didn't like, then you don't just stick the knife in. You say, well, this didn't work, and you might be able to suggest how to improve it. And you often get that with these post-occupancy evaluations. People suggest what needs to be done. So that's the way to go. But what do we do with this once we've got it? I mean, a lot of the issues they will raise are not fundamental. They're very simple to alter. They may not be cheap to alter, but they're fairly straightforward to alter. You can change furniture, you can change the layout a little bit if the workstations aren't fixed to the floor, etc. I mean, of course, you've got a problem with the power and the IT and that, but that's normally in a grid pattern, so you can change them, and they can be cured quite quickly. You could do some of this. You can do during the ordinary cleaning and maintenance. You might be able to do a little bit at a weekend, bring a contractor in to do a few bits. But they're fairly straightforward, and they're so minor. You could argue they shouldn't have happened in the first place if you'd done your design properly and you'd watched other similar offices working. But some issues, unfortunately, can be really fundamental, and they're going to need to be considered for when you do a refit or a refurbishment. Now, you've got to look at how that mistake was made. This is where the circle of information, the circle of life, is that it goes round again. You've got to learn from these. Not enough investigation and research was done initially, I would suggest. The lessons that you learn must be shared. They are not secret, and they've got to be shared with the design team and the contractors so they learn for next time. And the users. The users need to know that their voice has been heard and it was worthwhile doing the questionnaires and the interviews. Otherwise, they won't do it next time, and you'll get a very poor response rate. So you need to let them know. And when something's been done, you've got to tell them. Now, that they'll see it in their office area. Still tell them. But when it's something that's back of house, out of sight, maybe it's something to the aircon, or you've reprogrammed the lifts because they were taking too long, tell them you've done it because they can't see you've done it. Tell them. Keep them in the loop. And then the next project that you do, or the contractor does, or the client does, should be totally informed by what we've learned from the existing project where we've done this review. And if the project is for a specific user or use, go and look at existing examples. Ask people about existing examples. Observe people doing the same job in a different place. You should analyse them to educate yourselves on this new design so you can avoid the mistakes again. That would appear to be the thing that we fall down on most of the time. So that's all you need to know about these post-occupancy reviews. The readings are quite good for it. Apart from that, I hope this hasn't been too complicated. I don't think it was, really. I mean, I would give a post-occupancy review of the little unit I'm sitting in at the moment saying the fridge isn't big enough to put my wine in. Well, that's not big one, is it? I can just buy another fridge. But there you go. All right then, nice to talk to you. I hope this has helped.